And my guest today is a trainer, speaker, and consultant, and he makes understanding finance easy. My goodness, we look forward to that. And he's been in business for more than 20 years. I'm delighted to welcome Phil Ingle to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Phil.
Hello. Hello there.
Hi, great to have you. My goodness, making finance easy for the rest of us. I'm interested in that. We'll follow it on. But as you know, I take everybody back to their last year in school, and I'm sort of just wondering, were you the academic? Were you the nomad? What was on the cards for you as you left school?
So, last year in school for me, definitely not academic or nomad. It was just scraping by. So I did some A levels, and got minimal grades in those. And I can see, you still kind of remember your last days in school and things, and overall they were happy times. But in my case, it definitely wasn't down the academic route, because no one in my family had been to university or anything. I didn't really understand what all that was about. So for me, it was left school, and then I had exactly 2 weeks, and then I went straight to work. On my 18th birthday, I went straight to work in Barclays Bank.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, nice.
Okay. And so yes, straight into working. And
right.
At that time, that was seen as a good job to have. It's steady, job for life, good kind of package. And I think as my time in banking went by, I realized that actually it was, generally speaking, all of those things, albeit you were never going to get mega rich or anything like that, but you would get by, and then there was nice people and things there. And as I look back on my time there was ups and downs along the way, but overall I enjoyed what I was doing, not least because in those days there wasn't as much technology, and therefore it was a lot of human interaction, and indeed it was a lot of human judgment involved, a lot of subjectivity. I'm not saying that was always necessarily a good thing or terribly consistent, but I enjoyed it. But within a relatively short space of time, I was getting well trained and well looked after as an employee, and I went and stuck my hand up as someone who would train other people. So I was sent off to Wimbledon for a week to go and be trained to be a trainer, and I really loved that.
That's quite interesting, because somebody who said, okay, I'm not academic, I'm not going to university, and again joined the bank, you did exactly what I did back in the day. So I know what that feeling was like, and there was a lot of customer interactivity and good people to work with.
Yeah.
But to go off to learn to be a trainer of other people is an interesting decision.
I've got a reasonably extrovert nature, and I think it feeds that, or it certainly did. At the same time, and Alec, I don't know what you did in your banking days as well, but there was at that time quite a lot of direction to do some continuing professional development. In other words, do your banking exams, which I did. And I didn't pass them all first time. I mean, I did get get banking exams and things, and then went on to do some other financial qualifications, exciting titles like the financial planning certificate. But no, I really enjoyed training. I think it's the human element and the human interactions, and also seeing other people experience light bulb moments, and develop. And I think particularly in soft skills area, when you started talking about things like sales skills, management skills, and leadership. But of course, if you're in banking, then you're going to be understanding finance, very much at the sharp end of things, and not just finance from a theoretical perspective or an accounting perspective, but you know, a very practical one too. And in my case, and in those days, I was lucky because what you did is you had a regular job in a bank branch, but every now and again you'd be sent off to a training center and you go and run a training program for, it might be a week or it might even be 2 weeks
Right.
or so. And so you'd be doing some training, but then you'd be back, you know, in the regular job, if I say at the sharp end, talking to customers, and therefore not just talking about theory, but talking about practice and what's going on and being aware of what's happening in the real world at the same time.
I mean, that must have been a fascinating world because not alone are you training, but you're seeing the results and then able to tweak your training to respond to what you're seeing on the ground.
Well, yeah, and for me, I found particularly when we're getting into the area of things like customer service skills and selling skills and things, you can see the gaps between theory and practice. I mean, it's fine talking about how, you know, in a classroom, how we go about serving a customer and what goes on, but there was times when you could see, hang on, this isn't working. There's some shortcoming. What, you know, there's some, and you know, there's something missing. And I was aware of like some gaps and things that along the way, and it made you aware of that. And of course, you're able to feed that back. You know, say, well, listen, I know that this is, you know, how we're training people, but that's not what's actually always happening in action. You know, there's other things needed, and you can highlight those things. And that was really useful. And even I did a couple of full-time training jobs right. as well, with, you know, less interaction stuff, but it's always making sure that you're keeping things relevant and practical, and in a situation where stuff can be applied and things can be done. I think as well, in the time I was in banking, it was a different era. There was not as much technology available then.
Sure.
That meant the focus is on human interaction, it's on human judgment, and that's got failings, as you know,
of course.
as well. But that was, for me, was, you know, the enjoyable thing, that human thing. And there was less regulation and things in those days as well. I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't say that was necessarily a good thing, because the regulatory regime that financial services works in these days is necessary. But there are also all sorts of other things that you're able to get up to as well. Well, you had, I remember one instance in a branch, someone claiming to be a customer committed an act of fraud on us, and they got away with some money. Well, this, you know, in a local bank branch, you like followed that up yourself. So we poked about, we got the police involved and things, and the police discovered who it was, and the fact that with the money that they'd got away with, they'd gone off and bought a motorbike. The police arrested them anyway and did them for the fraud, and the bank then ended up with a motorbike. Now that coincided with me being the only person in the branch with a motorbike license, and happened to have insurance to ride any motorcycle. So I found myself around the back of a police station being given the keys to a motorbike, and the policeman says, look, Phil, it's been in here for a few months, so the tax has run out, but look, don't worry, if you get any hassle, just tell them I said it's all right, I'll be all right. So of course I, you know, ride off on the motorbike with my mission then to turn this into cash. Well, you didn't want to go and sell the motorbike without testing it thoroughly first, so I was riding it down my hometown of Bedford one Sunday, pulled up at the traffic lights next to a police car, who I could see looking at the out-of-date tax disc, and as I turned right, he then pulled across 4 lanes of traffic to follow me with the lights flashing and everything. You get pulled over, and I tell the story, you know, he starts off, are you the owner of this motorcycle? Well, no. And his face lit up and he thought, fantastic, you know, this is great. You aware it's out of tax? Well, yeah, I did. But, you know, this guy at the police station said it would be all right. And you could think, yeah, right. Okay. So, you know, you're not obliged to say anything, but anything you do say. And there you go. But booked on the spot. And there you go, a load of aggravation, admin, letter writing, and all the rest of it. It was eventually agreed that I would pay the tax and they would not prosecute me as well. I'm not sure that would happen these days. I think, yeah, different sort of things would go on, again, in those, I mean, you know, today it's sort of, you know, online scams and everything else like that. But in some of my earlier banking days, if someone wanted to commit an act of fraud, they actually had to come into the bank branch. And I got good at spotting some of these people, and other people in the branch would spot these people, which was how we built up a relationship with the police. So, you know, if you get someone trying it on, part of my job was to keep them talking until the police arrived. That also led me to being invited to a local CID Christmas party one year, because in recognition of the amount of business that I'd introduced their way. Again, I'm not sure you would do that these days.
No. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my studio guest today is Phil Ingle. We're just regarding banking days of a different period, of which I can associate with fully. But you were going to move on. I mean, the training was going to become an important part of your life. And so professional development and exams were going to come about because you had spent some time in the bank.
Yeah. So I did 20 years in the bank, and as I think anyone listening to the show here that has worked for a large organization for a long time will realize that if you're in that position, there's a good chance you're going to come across the opportunity to become redundant. Now, redundancy for some people may come like a bolt out of blue and unexpected and indeed unwelcome. And I sympathize with that. But I was aware that, you know, times are changing in banking, and you could see the effect of technology. And so you could see the opportunity would come for me to take voluntary redundancy. And, you know, various people I knew were doing this.
Sure.
And that was running alongside something else, because I'd done my banking exams and financial qualifications. I also did fascinating qualification, which I love, becoming a master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, which some of your listeners may have heard of, and others, if you Google NLP, then you'll find a bit about what it's about. And I found that fascinating. And there's, in terms of my own development, I was then thinking, well, what next? But having left school and gone straight into work,
sure,
I realized I hadn't done a degree, I hadn't been to university. And I thought first of all about doing a degree in economics, because actually that interested me. But there was a mate at work who was doing an MBA, and you know, you start talking to him about what's involved, and so I applied to Cranfield University to do an MBA. I had to have a couple of bites at that particular cherry before they let me in, but eventually I managed to persuade them. And that coincided, like within a matter of a couple of weeks, got accepted onto that with the offer of becoming redundant. And at that time, it was a big decision, because we're still kicking around your head is this idea that this is a steady job and it's a big change and you've been there a long time, sure, and what if it doesn't work out and all the rest of it. So and this is one of the lessons I thought I hope some people that are listening to this might find helpful. It's about attitude to risk,
right?
And one of the things I learned out of that particular time of my life, where I was changing career and going out of what some people describe as a safe job or a steady job, and it got lots of plus points to it, but out into the world of self-employment. There was a period of reflection for me there that helped me understand much more about risk. And the first thing about risk is that whatever you do, there is risk. There is no such thing as no risk. And when talking it through with the lady who is now my wife, is that I reflected that for me at that time, staying in banking was a bigger risk than me taking redundancy and going out on my own. And it was a bigger risk from not from a financial point of view or even employment point of view, but just from a whole kind of life point of view. If I had stayed doing what I was doing, where would I have been in 10 years? And I could kind of see where I would be in 10 years and would I be happy doing it? Well, it might have worked. But having been in banking for a while, I was wondering, what's it like if you're not doing that? And how do you find out? And, is grass really greener and these things as well? And for me, there's a massive, going self-employed was a massive risk. But for me, it was an even bigger risk to stay doing what I'd been doing. And whenever you're approaching some big decision, I think particularly, bigger decisions from there, I've found that useful to reflect on, is that whichever way you go, there's no guarantees. There's
exactly.
And what you're doing is weighing up the risk of taking a risk of doing something different against what's the risk of staying where you are doing what you're doing. And wherever you are, there is a risk in that. And that's one of the things you have to weigh up. And that's ultimately what you feed into. And when I'm training, and I'm training people on risk management now as well, but when you're training them, you talk about someone's appetite for risk. However many algorithms, however much AI and data there is around risk management, ultimately it's a human subjective decision about feeling. And yeah, there is no such thing as zero risk.
Great. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my studio guest is Phil Ingle. I'm picking up on the subject of risk. You've taken the risk, you've taken the jump, and you've got involved in CIPD. What were you going to do? Because you had to have some plan to start developing your own business.
Right, I certainly should have had some plan, shouldn't I? Especially when I train in this. As I look back, and one of the things actually I train people in now is business strategy and planning, and I do that for various people, including startup and fast growth businesses. The University of Warwick near me have an organisation called Business Ready, like an incubator unit. And I train them in things like business planning. And one of my reflections on there is that when I went out on my own, I really did not have that much of a plan. But you definitely should, and I do now. I've got some better sense of things. But here's the thing we learned about, or what I've learned about plans as well. Should you have one? Yes, you absolutely should. But you can be certain of one thing about your plan, is that the reality is going to be different. Now, Alec, as you introduced yourself, understanding finance easier. So listening to this show, particularly if you're in business, you're going to know something here as well, is that I'm pretty confident there is no one listening to this show that has ever seen a budget where the actual figure exactly matches the forecast.
Yeah,
okay?
I think that's true. Now, all right.
With budgets, some people find that hugely frustrating because they think that the way that your budget works is that you have this budget figure and that's what it's got to be, and this is where you end up in this cycle of, it's getting towards the end of the year, we've got to spend the budget and other things, or this other lie, which finance people tell you sometimes about it's not in the budget. There's another story about that. But there's a huge amount, you can take some certainty out of this. Whatever plan you're making, and particularly if you're doing a budget, which is just a type of plan, the thing you can be certain about is that reality is going to be different. It will not always go according to plan. Now, look, some things will happen according to plan, you know, here and there, and that's wonderful. But most of the time, that's not what's going to happen. And consequently, as business people, we can use that and just go ahead, having a plan, knowing where we want to go, knowing what we want to achieve, which is great, but accepting it ain't going to turn out like that.
Sure.
But then you've got a choice. You can change things, see what else you need to alter, you do some complicated variance analysis and everything, by all means, if that's what you're into. But accept that whatever you're doing in life, the reality is going to be different, and that is the situation which is normal. The issue is what you do about it. The analogy I draw about this is that, you know, whether you're doing a budget or whether you do a business plan, whatever it is, it's a flight plan. When I'm coming over to Dublin, I was delighted to say actually that we must be able to get over to Dublin again now. My last overseas trip pre-pandemic was it's flying into Dublin. Went to a lovely little town called Locklin Bridge, all right, and did some work there for a few days. Yeah, when you're getting on the plane to Dublin, you just check there's someone in the pointy end that's got a list and is checking it twice. You know, they've got a flight plan. And if you look at the plane in the sky, you know, I fly from Birmingham into Dublin. Okay, you look at the plane in the sky, you see the vapor trails, and they look really straight. Actually, what's going on is that the computer on board is looking at the reality and then just making adjustments all the time. Okay.
Yeah.
That aeroplane spends most of its time flying off course. If you look at the reality of it, most of the time it spends its time flying off course. And this is what we do as business people as well. You're going to spend most of your time flying off course. That is normal. It's up to you to decide whether that's acceptable or not. And it's up to you to decide, as, you know, pilot, so to speak, what action you take so that you get where you want to get to. So, you know, with your airplane friend, as long as I ended up at Dublin Airport, which I did, then, you know, you get there, but there's going to be twists, turns and changes along the way. You got to expect those sort of things. And, you know, from my NLP training, one of the phrases out there, the map is not the territory, you know, the plan is not the reality. That's the way life is. It's up to you just to react accordingly.
No, and I think that's a very good analogy for business. And I think people should reflect upon that, because I know certain people are always looking for certainty, but there is no certainty in business, as we discovered with COVID and now the war that's going on as well. We never know what's going to come at us next.
Well, this is also where Alec might take a slightly different view from you as well. You say there's no certainty in business. Actually, there is certainty in business. The certainty is that the reality will be different from the plan.
Yes.
Okay? All right. If you like, and you know, that's kind of where, ironically, the certainty comes. But there are, I think, very few certainties in business as well. Again, on finance, the only thing I tell people about the certainty in the world of finance is that the balance sheet must balance. Okay. Yes. If it doesn't, it's time to have a serious word with your accountant and possibly scoot around for another one. You know, but there are very few certainties, but that doesn't mean that you cannot embrace the future and carry on and go off in the direction that you want to go in. And that's what having a plan is about, is giving you some sense of direction about what you are doing. So that's why it still helps you do that. But it's going to work out different.
Well, I suppose in the last 2 minutes, I know your career has taken you all over the Middle East and training, in particular around financing, but also the softer skills. For people who want to find out more about Phil Ingle, where will they find more details and how can they contact you?
So a quick Google of Phil Ingle will hopefully reveal me alongside the managing director at Morgan Stanley and a painter and decorator in Market Raisin, I think. And there's a professional photographer as well. And the other Phil Ingle, there's a professional snowboarder who is in somewhere in North Wales. So consequently, if you want Phil Ingle who trains in finance, I'm pretty easy to find, especially on LinkedIn or on my website, which is philingleassociates.com. And you can get Phil's finance thoughts every week delivered to your inbox if you sign up for that, which is a learning point each week and my own unique explanation of a little piece of finance jargon there.
I suppose with this sort of minute and 10 seconds we've left, have you a message that you'd like people maybe to reflect on as we sign off?
Yeah, I think the realization, having been self-employed now for 20 years, is that when you go self-employed, you got two jobs. Your second job is whatever job you describe yourself as. So for me, that's helping people understand finance. The first job is to find some customers. So for me, I can't train anyone if I don't find anyone who needs training. Okay, and for whatever businesses are listening here, if you're running the business, you've always got two jobs. But number one is find the customers. If you don't do that, there is no job. There is no work.